If you've ever stood on a piece of land in the Texas Hill Country and tried to picture the home that belongs there, or stood in front of an older home in San Antonio, knowing it's coming down and something extraordinary is going to take its place, you know that feeling. Excited, a little overwhelmed, and not entirely sure where to start. This is the Collier Way, a podcast about what it really takes to build a home that lasts. I am Collier Bashara, Southern Living Builder of the Year and founder of Collier Custom Homes. Every episode, I share what over 2 decades of building luxury homes in San Antonio and the Texas Hill Country has taught me, so you can make better decisions, ask better questions, and find the right team for the most important project of your life. Subscribe and follow along. Every episode, something worth knowing. How are y'all doing today? Welcome back to the Collier Way. I'm so excited you're here today. We're going to explore some really fun stuff today and just kind of build on the steps that it takes to do a custom home. And the first step is always finding where you're going to build that home. Whether you're building in the middle of San Antonio, whether you are doing historical restoration, whether you are building up in the hill country or on a ranch down south of town. Finding the dirt is kind of one of the first steps, and it is exciting, but it can also be overwhelming and intimidating. And so I'm going to kind of walk you through the steps that I take and what I advise my clients to take, and really kind of say, these are the first steps that you're going to take when you decide to build a custom home. This is just a fun part of the process, and you should be really excited as you're out there letting your mind go crazy. What am I going to build? What am I going to look at every morning when I wake up? What am I going to look at when I get home? And I find this to be really a fun part. So the first step is you're now looking for dirt. You're now looking for a place for your dream home. You are either looking to build a house, renovate a house, build on raw land, knock a house down. That comes down to you at the end of the day and what really is going to make you and your family happy. So the first step is always, where am I going to build? I'm going to start with in the middle of San Antonio. If you want to do an infill project like we do a lot here in the Alamo Heights area of San Antonio, the first step is actually finding a lot, and usually it's going to have a house on it. So you're like, oh goodness, what do I do now? First thing is we've found the spot. We love the street, we love the neighbors, we love everything about it, but it has a house on it, and I think we're ready to make an offer. So you get with your agent, or if you are doing this on your own, you get with the seller. You say, okay, first thing is I want to see a survey. These are surveys, and they're a lot of information, but they tell you a lot about the property too, and they are important to really dive into it. And each survey kind of lays out a little differently, but they've got lots of very important information. One of the biggest mistakes I see people make is they look at the lot, and they see a fence, and they're like, oh, that's my property. And it's usually kind of sort of your property, but I have seen plenty of fences that are either set a foot in the wrong direction onto your property or a foot onto your neighbor's property. A survey really cleans that up for you. Now, if you are buying a house out of an estate and there's not a survey, get ready. The seller's going to ask you to pay for the survey. They're not going to be willing to pay for a survey. Pretty standard procedure, but you need to be ready for that. And you need the survey. So you've called, the homeowner says, yes, here's your survey. Now it's time to really dive into the survey and see, what does it say? Like I said, your first step, we're going to see, does the fence actually sit on the property line? Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but it's a bad assumption to ever assume that it does. The next thing you really want to look at is, are there any easements? Did somebody say, okay, I get 1 foot of your property to use for a sewer line? Or does the city have a 10-foot easement to run all its utilities? It doesn't necessarily change how you're going to build your house, but I have seen easements that also run right through the middle of a piece of property that do have a huge impact on where you can put your house and how you would build your house and what your footprint can look like. There's a lot once I saw over in Terrell Hills where they have a huge drainage easement and drainage running underneath this property, and it cuts right through the middle of the lot. So your buildable area is like the back left corner of this lot. So you have this huge, gorgeous lot, but you can't build on it. So you do want to know those things definitely before you step into it. Another thing you want to look for, is the property one lot or is it a piece of multiple lots? Infill projects a lot of times were bigger lots back in the day and have slowly been chopped up. So when you look at some of these properties that you're thinking about purchasing, a lot of time it's 35 feet of lot X and 20 feet of lot Y, which make up the one piece of property. Now that's all in the deed and it's a legitimate transfer, but a lot of times when you go to pull a permit to build a new house, they're going to tell you you're going to have to replat the property into one lot. It's just this process, but there is a cost associated with it, so it's important to know that. Finally, the last thing I would really generally look for is, do any of the neighbors or do you encroach on any of your neighbors? Does a building step across the property line? Does the neighbor directly behind you garage sit 2 feet into your property? Does the property on the right's driveway sit 12 inches into your property? Will that impact where you build? Probably not, but it is your land at the end of the day when you purchase it, and you're going to be paying taxes on it. So it's important to think through, how do you want to deal with neighbors? My recommendation generally is, when you see somebody encroaching on your lot, or if you're encroaching on somebody else's lot, it's important to put something in writing. Hey, I know your garage sits 12 inches into my backyard. I don't want to ask you to take it off of my property. I know that's not a realistic expectation, but in the future, if you go to rebuild your garage, we expect you to move your garage back onto your property. It's not okay that it is on ours, or we're not giving you our land. We're acknowledging that you're there, and in the future, we'd like you to be on your land, and we go on about our ways merrily. Some people are good with that, some people aren't, but it does happen pretty regularly, especially in these old neighborhoods where the surveys used to not be nearly as accurate as they are now, and people would go pull string lines and they'd use fences, which we've already talked about is not necessarily a property line, and then they would set their new house. The last thing I would say is, if you're having to order a new survey, the best thing you can do with your new survey is add a tree survey to it and add topography to it. If you add those two elements to a new survey, when you go to design your home, you've already taken that out of the equation. Now the architect knows exactly what we're looking at. We know what trees are there. We know what the topography of the land is. Is it real flat? Is there a funny fall off? All of those things are going to come into play when we're building a house. If you have heavy fall off on the back, we may say, okay, this is a great opportunity to do a split level with a walkout basement. So it's important to understand the topography, and especially when you want to figure out drainage, because we do want the water to drain away from your house, not into your house. That's a bad thing. That's how you approach infill lots. Now, let's fast forward and let's drive up I-10, and we're going to go look at the hill country. So we're going to look at Bernie, we're going to look at Fredericksburg, we're going to look at Kerrville. And you are now going into either brand new subdivisions that have already been divided and you're looking at an acre lot, or you are looking at ranch land where maybe you're buying 10 acres, maybe you're buying 100 acres. And where are we going to put your new home? And again, what are we going to look at? Where is the wind coming from? What's the sun doing? These are all things that we're going to take into play. So if you're looking at a new subdivision, the first thing I say is you need to get a copy of the covenances within that subdivision. New subdivisions will have a lot of rules associated with what you can build in the subdivision. How much masonry do you have to have on the house? What kind of roof are you allowed to have? How big a garage do you need? These will all come into your design, and they're important to know. Now, if you're working with a realtor, the realtor should know a lot of that information for you. They should be able to say, okay, in this subdivision, X, Y, and Z are going to be your requirement. You could also have a requirement of who's going to build your house. Some of these subdivisions have restrictions and say, okay, you have to be a preferred builder within XYZ subdivision to get to build the houses. You may meet the person and, like I warned you on our first podcast, get that funny tingling in the back of your mouth and head, and you're like, holy cow, I just don't trust this person and I need to go find something else. Well, that is a problem if you've already bought a piece of land and he's the only builder allowed in that area. So pay attention to those covenances, pay attention to that process. And again, you want to see a survey. A lot of times they will, in brand new subdivisions, they should have a survey already done on the property so you can see exactly what's there. And if you want topography and trees, that might be an add-on that you choose to make, but you'll know who's already done the survey originally, so you can reach back out to them and say, we would like to do a survey that includes A, B, and C, i.e. topography, trees, and then they at least have the original file and are not going to go searching for it. Now let's fast forward. You found 10 acres and there's a big hill on that 10 acres and you are going to build your dream home on top of that hill. We get up there, we're looking around. My first question is always going to center around utilities. Do you have city water, or are you going to need to drill a well? Do you have city sewer? Or are you going to need a septic? How do you get electricity? What are we going to do for gas? I will tell you, in the hill country, usually you're going to have a propane tank. That's pretty standard, and it's common, and propane is a great natural source for fuel. For water, that's half dozen one, dozen the other. It really depends on where you are, but a lot of times you're going to have to drill a well, or these days it's becoming more and more common to see rain collection, and that is a great way to solve water issues. And I think it's probably the way of the future. Water is becoming a valuable resource, and it's getting to be a scarce resource. We're hitting longer and longer droughts. Rain collection, big rain collection cisterns, they are becoming more popular. And I think they are a great option if you're going to build out in the hill country. Now, electricity. How are we going to get electricity? Where is the nearest electrical source? What is it going to cost to get electricity up to the top of this hill? These are all things that you need to be taking into consideration when you're looking at remote sites to build a home. It's all doable, but there's a cost associated with it, and in the back of your mind, you need to be adding that to your budget. If you are building on top of a super steep hill, how are we going to get all of our equipment up there? We're going to have to cut a road. Is the road going to be strong enough for all this heavy equipment that we're going to need to get up there? Or are we going to have to do two roads? We're going to build kind of a Collier road and get everything in there, and then before you move into the house, we're going to do a second road. I've done both for clients, so it's something to certainly take into consideration. The other thing is super steep hills. We did a project once where this client was up on this super steep hill, and we'll go to pour their foundation, and here come the concrete trucks, and all of a sudden we realize it is so steep that the concrete is actually pouring out of the concrete trucks, so we have to back the concrete trucks all the way up this hill to keep the concrete in the truck, and then we can pour our foundation. That only happened on about the first 5 trucks. After that, we were able to correct it, and we started ordering half loads in the trucks, but added cost because each truck has a delivery cost, not just the concrete that's in it. So increase the cost of the foundation. Things just to think about. Once you get on top of that hill, also, what do our trees look like? What trees are we trying to save? What are we going to remove? And I think the most important thing to do at that stage is stay super excited. Remember what we are trying to achieve. Don't worry so much about the trees. We want to save as many as we can, because you get an oak tree that's this big around, I can't plant you a new one of those. But if it's right in the middle of where your house is going to go and it's the only place we can set your house, you're going to lose the tree. It's an unfortunate reality. It happens. We do our best to save them, but sometimes the perfect spot is going to be a decision of, well, we find the less perfect spot and save the tree, or the tree has to go. Just something to think about. And again, concentrate on what you're trying to achieve, which is this amazing home, this amazing view, you want to see sunsets there every evening when you get home from work. You want to watch the sunrise and watch all the birds and deer, and there's a lot of fun to when you build out in the hill country. Those are all things to take into consideration. Now let's take the other approach. You're back in, let's say you're up in Kerrville now, and now you have found an amazing piece of land that sits on the Guadalupe River. We are all very familiar in South Texas of flooding, especially with all the events that took place last year on July 4th. So now the very important question is, where's the floodplain? When you are looking at a lot, if the floodplain covers the entire lot, that's one to probably walk away from. You just need to know where exactly the water is going to be. And FEMA does a good job of telling you where the floodplain is, where the 100-year floodplain is, where the 500-year floodplain is, and I suspect pretty quick you'll be able to get copies of the 1,000-year floodplain. That doesn't mean it happens once every 100 years. It just means there's a 10% chance that it's going to happen this year when you're talking about 100-year floodplains. So that's something you definitely take into account. Now, if you're facing that, there's always going to be an elevation that you're going to have to achieve. Okay, I need to be X number of feet above sea level. And that is something that we can establish. And so maybe it becomes something as simple as, okay, we are 2 feet into the floodplain, and so we pour a 3 feet foundation out of the ground to make sure that we are above the floodplain by at least 12 inches. And then we have to take into account where we're going to put your septic system, or are you on the city sewer? And that area, you're probably going to be on a septic, because the septic system cannot sit in a floodplain. That's a pretty serious rule. There's tricks to paying attention to exactly where you're going to put your house. If there's a little bit of a hill, we can always set kind of the back half of the house on the hill and put the front half of the house on stilts. I've done that for clients on lakes before, where we needed to be above the dam. And that's, okay, here's the top of the dam. We are going to be 18 inches higher than that, so we know that the house will never flood. So we put the house on the side of the hill with stilts in front of it. Works perfectly at the end of the day. And those houses don't flood because they're set in the right direction. You need to pay attention to water, and we know that very well here in South Texas. So these are all things you take into consideration. These are all conversations that you have with the seller and that you need to take into account when you're building the house. How are we going to place the house? All those are going to come into play at the end of the day. The last thing I will take you back to, we're going to go back into the city. And again, we have found another infill lot. We have found one that has a house on it that now we're scratching our heads saying, do we really want to do ground up? Or maybe this is an opportunity for a renovation. Okay, so we get in the house. I have some cardinal rules about renovations. And when we're looking at houses that need major renovation, good foundation and good roof, those are non-negotiable in my opinion. If you have a bad foundation, you're never going to end up with a good foundation. If you have a bad roof, it means you have probably got termites and wood rot and other issues that probably make the house not worth saving. So those are things that you really, really want to think through if you have now changed gears from ground up to renovation. Now, if those things are both good, we got good foundation, we got good roof, the next thing I'm going to tell you to look at is how many times has the house been added onto? If the house is a virgin, virgins are the best. They are original, they've been well maintained, but nobody has gone in and really chopped on it too much. Now, finding one that was built in the 20s that hasn't been touched is pretty hard to find because in the 20s they didn't have air conditioning. In South Texas summer, not pleasant without air conditioning. So almost all of them had some work done to them. And you want that work. You want that maintenance. You want to know that the house has been well taken care of. Just like our showcase house last year, that house had been very well taken care of. It had very few modifications from the original floor plan. It had a few, but they were all done without making huge changes to the house, without making structural changes to the house. The updates were smart updates. And since we were doing a complete shell out, meaning we were going to rip every bit of the plaster out of the house, every bit of the electrical out of the house, and basically start over with just a shell, then it was okay that those type things had been done. And the fact that they had not moved much in the house and had done no structural work meant we really were dealing with an original house at the end of the day. So now that we have the next conversation of understand there are limitations to renovation. So you can't walk into a house with an 8-foot ceiling and tell me, hey, I want a 10-foot ceiling. A house with an 8-foot ceiling is always going to be a house with an 8-foot ceiling. We're not going to amazingly give you 10 feet of ceiling height. It can be done, but generally by the time I have done it, it was cheaper to have started over than to add a 10-foot ceiling. Now we take our next step before we knock the house down as we go through the house. What in the house is worth saving? A lot of times we can find old hardware that is just amazing once the paint's been stripped off of it and it's been polished. And we can reuse that in the new house, which gives the new house some amazing character. Sometimes we can find doors that are worth saving. So we take these old doors that were solid wood and we strip them down and get them ready to repaint in the new house and do a whole restoration on it. One of the biggest hidden gems that I generally find in these old houses is the wood floors. A byproduct of COVID was we figured out how to reclaim wood floors because wood became so expensive back in 2020. So we had to start thinking outside the box to help our clients. And as a result, we figured out, okay, we can reclaim wood floors and use them again in the new houses. That has been one of the amazing gems that we have found. In the old days, they would go in and they would say, okay, we want oak floors. And everyone would get excited and all this oak would show up, but they didn't sort it. So it was a combination of white oak, red oak, quarter sawn and rifted. And it's all old growth, so it has really pretty graining in it. Or we end up with pine floors, old longleaf pine floors. I have found a ton of those in these houses right before we knock them down. And we've been able to save them and reuse them in the new house. And they look fabulous. They're long boards. They are just great looking products. This young lady here came out of a house that we did down in King William. It wasn't quite the client's taste, but we saw it and I thought it was really cool. So I hung on to it. And they were going to throw it away anyhow, so it worked out well for everybody. So before you knock them down, we do like to walk through them and say what's worth keeping and making your new house special. So that's the overall picture of what you're looking at when you start shopping for land, when you start making the next decision about where you're going to have your house that lasts forever. Most of the houses we look at, we do decide to knock down if it's an infill. If it's up on raw land, that's a little bit different because there's nothing to save, but we get some great opportunities of where we're going to put your house. And it's exciting. So lean into the excitement of it. When you're talking to a builder, bring them in early on something like this. Make sure you're talking to the builder about, this is my dream and this is how I intend it to go. It will help the process along the way. Same with the architects. Bring them in, talk to them, say, okay, this is what I'm thinking. This is my vision. How do we see this going in design process? And have a great realtor who helps you get the deal to the title company. There's more realtors that can blow that deal than you can imagine. So great ones, hang on to them with both hands. That's the crux of how you pick an amazing lot and the excitement of stepping forward into buying a lot, doing a project, and this is your first step. We're excited about our next episode. We're going to have Elizabeth Hain, architect. She has done a ton of my work over the years. She did our last showcase home and is doing this year's showcase home. So we're really going to walk through the design phase. We're going to revisit lots again and really do our next step. Now that you have found your dirt, your next step is we need to start designing your home. I'm really excited again that you were here today. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you found this informational. And if you ever have questions, if you ever need just to find something, send me a message, give me a phone call. I'm always happy to talk to people who are beginning this process, and really excited you're here. Thank you again for watching The Collier Way. Hope you have a great day. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode. This has been The Collier Way. Thank you for spending time with me today. New episodes every week. Subscribe whenever you listen to podcasts and follow along on YouTube. I am Collier Bashara. See you soon and have a great day.